This week on the mini guitar lesson, I thought we'd continue our exploration of chord shapes and different chord types by looking at a couple of seventh chords, looking at the major seventh and the dominant seventh chord. Now, we previously learned a major triad way back on episode 1 of Everything Guitar, which a major triad or a triad is made up of 3 notes. And a major triad would be made up of a root, a third, and a fifth. So as an example, here is a D major chord that's made up of, I'm going to play this with actually 4 notes because it's a form everyone knows, but your D major triad is made up of a D, an A, and an F sharp. And then obviously in the standard D form, we also have that octave D, an octave higher there. So to take a major chord and make it into a major seventh chord, you basically need to add in a seventh or a major seventh. So let's walk through that. If we know this is a D chord, then we know the seventh is going to be 1 note before that, which is going to be a C. And a major 7 is going to be a C sharp in the chord D. So how do we build that? Well, if we look here, we've got our root D. We've got our G, which is our third. We've got another D, which is our octave. And we have our F sharp, which is our fifth. So an easy way to build these chords is to take your octave and lower it by the appropriate number of steps for the type of chord you're building. Since we're wanting a major seventh in this case, we want to lower that down to 1 step. Instead of being a D for our octave note, we want to lower that down to a C sharp. So the easiest way to play that, if this is our standard D, is just to bar the 2nd fret on the 3 bottom strings. So now we have D, A, C sharp, and F sharp. So there is D major 7. And that's notated capital D, M-A-J with a capital M and 7. Now that M-A-J for major doesn't mean that it's a D major chord, because when you're notating that, just the capital D signifies that it's a D major chord. If it was a minor chord, it would say D, M-I-N. But in this case, so that D by itself, capital D, means it's a D major. But putting M-A-J and the number 7 means that we're adding a major 7th to that. So once again, D major, this guy. D major 7, this guy. Gives it kind of an interesting little tonal flavor there. Now, another 7th chord we can do is we can do a dominant 7th. To do a dominant 7th chord, what you do is you take your major triad or your major chord and you add a minor 7th. So, once again, the easiest way to build this, if we're on D, we've got our root D, our third A, an octave D, and our fifth F sharp. Well, we know if we just built a major 7th, we just added a major 7th by lowering this octave D down to a C sharp, half a step or 1 semitone. Then to make it into a minor 7th, we want to lower that 7th note, which is our C sharp in the major 7, by 1 more semitone or 1 more half a step, so it goes down to C. So then to play a D7 or D dominant 7th, we have our notes are D, open 4th string, A, 2nd fret, 3rd string, C, 1st fret on the 2nd string, and F sharp, 2nd fret on the 1st string. So that sounds like this. Very cool tone there. So the difference between a D major, standard form, a D major 7, and a D7 is what we do with that 2nd string in this case. So do we do a major 7, which is the C sharp, or do we do a minor 7, which is the C? So that also lends itself to some very cool opportunities as far as playing different progressions. You may have noticed there that that chord mirrors something that I was playing there in the intro to this video, where you can go. So let's take a look at that in another form now, because D is one of the easiest ones to build. Let's take a look at a G. Let's go down and we'll do this as a bar chord. So if we have a G major bar chord, that looks like this guy. G, D, a G octave, and a B. So taking the formula that we just learned, if that's our G major bar chord, remember to make it a major 7th chord, we need to add a major 7. And how did I say to do that? We said to take our octave, G, which is this guy in this case, and lower it 1 semitone or 1/2 step. So that comes down to the 4th fret, which becomes an F sharp. So that then becomes this chord form, G, D, F sharp, B. And that chord sounds like this. So, G major, bar chord, G major 7th. And the same thing we just talked about. If we want to make that into a G7 or a G dominant 7, remember what we do is we need to take our 7th, we need to make it a minor 7th. And how do we say to do that? We lower our 7th by another semitone or another 1 fret or another 1/2 step. So if this is G major 7, then G dominant 7 or just G7 would be this. G, D, barring the 3rd fret on the 4th string for our F, and B. So like this. So G major, bar chord, G major 7, G7. And how the dominant chords or the straight 7 chords are notated, I apologize I didn't mention this on the D, is it's just the letter of the chord and then the number 7 after. That signifies that it's a dominant 7th chord or that it has that minor 7 on top of your major triad. So if it's a G major, it's going to just be notated as a capital G. If it's a G major 7, it's going to be a capital G, then capital M, A, J, and the number 7, so that's our G major 7. And if it's a G7 or a G dominant 7 where we have the minor 7, it's just capital G and then the number 7. So G major, G major 7, G7. Now notice the nice thing about this when you're playing this in a bar chord format is you can move this across the fretboard and follow this same form or same pattern anywhere. F major 7, F dominant 7 or F7. So we can do this on the 5th string as well with bar chords. We need to keep in mind that that B string moves up 1/2 step, just like if you know how to play a bar chord there and then a bar chord here. You know that you have to move up your 2nd string 1/2 step because of how the guitar is tuned. So if we have our E major here on a bar chord, then E major 7 would look like this. And E7 would look like this. Our notes, just to spell that guy out, we would have, to start with, E, B, E octave, and G sharp. So then if we go to the E major 7, we just lower down our 7th, so our octave. E becomes a D sharp instead. So we've got E, B, D sharp, G sharp, E major 7. And then if we want to make that into an E7, we go 1 semitone or 1/2 step, 1 fret more down. So we have E, B, D, F sharp. There we go. So going back to the original one, just to review, D major, D major 7, D7, G major as a bar chord, G major 7, G7.